Hello and welcome everybody. Today we have a very special topic for you, and especially for medical students and doctors, a topic of great importance but sometimes neglected. We are going to be talking about depression and what medical students you all should know about it. And we have an esteemed guest today with us, Dr. Priyanka Mahajan. Dr. Priyanka is a consultant psychiatrist. She works at Masina Hospital in Mumbai, at Police Hospital in Mumbai, and Room Dharma Clinic, all in Mumbai. I'm also going to share her details about her email ID and her phone number for any one of you who would want to contact her later on. So, at the beginning, I would like to welcome you, Dr. Priyanka. Thank you for joining us. And I would like to start with some questions for you on this topic.
Thank you, Sushant. I am glad that we're talking about a topic which is of great importance and which is mostly neglected because mental health itself has a lot of stigma with it. And since today we're talking about it, so we get an opportunity to discuss with the future of the medical science in India about how to go about depression.
So, my first question to you is depression versus sadness. So, very often we could be sad. I mean, that's how I think of it. So, is sadness same as depression, or is depression anything different that I should understand?
Okay. Sadness, as we all say, is an emotion, and we all go through sadness at one point or the other in our life. For example, today I had my result, I did not score well, so I may be sad. So, sadness per se is an emotion which is also a part of depression. But depression is a syndrome. It is a group of symptoms which are there at one point in time, which is faced by a person. It could be the patient who presents with depression generally presents with sadness of mood, which is persisting at least for 2 weeks. So, if you're sad for a period of maybe 3, 4 days or 7, 8 days, you might not consider it as depression. It comes back to normal. So, that is a part of sadness. But with depression, you have other feelings such as feeling of low self-worth, feeling of guilt. A lot of patients who are in depression always say, I feel I'm not worth anything. They present with anhedonia. Anhedonia is basically a feeling of not enjoying things you used to enjoy earlier. For example, nowadays a lot of medical students are used to partying, clubbing once in a week or once in a fortnight, going out with friends for movies. So if a person suddenly withdraws from everything, stops going out with your friend circle, stops enjoying things, stops going to movies and doesn't interact much with people, it signifies that there is a component of depression in him. The other symptoms of depression which we generally see is feeling of hopelessness, feeling of helplessness, feeling of low self-worth, as I explained, feeling of low confidence. A lot of people who report to us always say that they don't feel like eating a lot, or maybe they resort to binge eating. So both the spectrums are seen in depression, and there's a considerable sleep disturbance which is seen. One spectrum of patients which present to us are the ones which do not sleep at all. They don't feel sleepy because they're anxious, they're depressed, they don't feel like going to bed. But at the same time, they're throughout the day lying in the bed and not feeling to get up and not having the energy to go to attend classes, not go to meet anyone outside, or not even go to have food in the mess. That kind of spectrum is seen. And the last but not the least is these people start feeling like not living. They feel like, what is the point of living? I should be ending my life. And suicidal ideations, when come in, that is the time we label depression as a severe thing, and that is when an immediate action is required.
So, about sadness and depression, let's just focus on this question of depression. Are medical students, medical residents, or consultants, is the medical fraternity overall should be considered at high risk of developing depression?
Very good question, Sushant. I would say that depression is the most common illness reported by WHO in the world at present, and it amounts to the maximum burden of global burden of disease. Whereas when we look at the entire range of things, medicos are more prone to getting depressed because we are the people who are at the front. First thing, we deal with patients every day, we deal with a lot of illness. So the amount of exposure the clinicians have, they tend to become depressed with that. Second thing, if we look from the perspective of medical students, a lot of research says that the medical students who come into the stream are generally the top 10 or top 5% of the people from their city or state. But when they come to a medical college, they find almost 300 to 400 replicas of themselves. They have to now fight with those 3 to 400 people to be in the top 5%, which is generally impossible for everyone to be there. So if amongst the batch of 300 students, you are at the 270th position, there is a sense of lowness which comes in, which seeps in. You are not able to meet your family expectations. In 12th standard, you were the topper, whereas when you go to the medical college, you're among the last 5%. So even the parents start thinking that the child is going somewhere else. So you're not able to meet their expectations. Plus, the workload increases enormously, especially when you are preparing for your PG entrance examinations. You have to work day and night. You don't even give time to yourself for relaxation. The duties increase for postgraduate students. We have encountered a lot of postgraduate suicide and a postgraduate depression coming in nowadays. In fact, it's been coming since a long time because the working hours have gone up so much that they are not able to complete on their sleep. They're not able to live what they want to. It's always a bed of roses on the other side. That once you become a consultant, things will be better. But for going through that, this rigorous training which is there, it burns them out completely. So that is why being in this fraternity, not only us, our friends, our family members, everyone goes through it. But yes, medical students are more at risk. And a study which is done in Delhi, which states that 1 in 3 medical students per class, which is considerable number, 1 in 3, suffers from a mental illness such as depression and anxiety and needs help.
I also agree with you here, Dr. Priyanka, that we do see medical students going through a tremendous amount of stress, a lot of peer pressure to perform well over here. The PG entrance, as you rightly said, is one area of stress, but even before that, the competition and this feeling that we are perhaps not good to be here, that really catches up with a lot of students. But then again, when I think of it, as medical fraternity, whether we are students or residents or consultants, isn't it that we have an access to healthcare, so we understand depression? So shouldn't it be that the results, even if we are more likely to be depressed, are we also going to be the people who would do better because we have access to healthcare, so we can maybe self-treat or at least know when we are supposed to meet an expert?
Fortunately, unfortunately, yes, we are exposed to a lot of options to us. We can go and visit a psychiatrist. Most of you in medical colleges have a well developed psychiatry department with wards. And trust me, not even 1% of the students here would have gone to psychiatry to seek help other than just going for their duties. We have exposure to everything, but we do not do it because there is a lot of stigma that comes with psychiatry. The stigma that is there that if I go to a psychiatrist, what will my friend think? Who's just living in my room or who's just next to my room? That why am I going to a psychiatrist? Am I a mad person? The thing is, there are studies which have shown that the number of suicides and the depression cases are much higher in medicos, and the seeking help is much lower in them. So we have been trying endlessly. We have been organizing lectures for the students, giving them sessions that no, this is something which you should not be scared of because depression is something which we can deal with and you can deal with. You can, people think that they can deal with it themselves. Definitely, if it's a mild form of depression, there are certain things which we'll be talking about which can help them cope up with depression. But if it is a severe form of depression, if it's a moderate kind of depression, you definitely need help. And there is no harm in seeking it. But not many people do it.
That's very unfortunate considering that we have the resources around us to make the best out of it, and if students are not really utilizing it, that's really not good. And perhaps that's also the reason why we are doing this kind of an activity where we would want students to make the best utilization of the departments that are there in your colleges, or reach out to Dr. Priyanka or any other psychiatrist that you have an access to right now. Also, one very important question over here is, as a student and resident, and now as a consultant, I have noted that across centers of higher learning in India, and definitely in medical schools, even you mentioned it, the rates of suicides are really high. This number of suicides, we are having a two-way loss. Our best of the minds are suffering from suicides and ideations like that. Now, it is possible that, maybe I'm not suffering from depression, but my friend is, or, the symptoms that you described as a medical student or as a resident, I feel that my friend has those symptoms. What can I do at such a time? If I feel that my friend has similar features which could be depression, but he or she isn't really talking about it to me, what would be your suggestion to someone like me if it's my friend who has it?
Great. So if you, your patient, your family member, your friend, anyone, so I have made it very clear that anyone can suffer from depression. In India, in India and worldwide, 1 in 6 people lifetime suffer from depression as compared to the medical students, which is 1 in 3. If you find your friend, your batchmate, your classmate, or anyone you know very closely suffering from depression and coming and even conveying it to you once that I don't feel like living, this is a big red warning sign for us, for you as doctors, for you as the people who are going to be the future of the medical profession, that do not hesitate in telling that person that you need help. You need professional help. Many of the students at the age when they are in the medical school, listen to this and tell their friend, जाने दे यार ये तो सबके साथ होता है, मेरे साथ भी हुआ था, तेरे साथ भी हो रहा है. You will go through it, you will pass through it, you will sail through it. Let's go out for a movie and let's chill out. If a patient ever conveys to you, or if a person ever conveys to you that he feels like ending his or her life, it should never be. It is a warning sign for us that the person may potentially that time get that feeling away from himself, but at a later point in time, go and harm himself. And suicides happen when people are alone with their thoughts. So if that is happening, the first thing you have to assure that person that don't worry, we'll work on it and we'll help you reach someone who can really help you come out of this situation. In that case, the first thing is go to a mental health professional, either a counselor or a psychiatric social worker or a psychiatrist. If they are not available in the vicinity, I would suggest if you're in a hospital, go and talk to your hospital warden or maybe a person in a superior authority who can involve that patient's family, or even if the person is not willing to involve the family, you can involve someone who can come into the picture and rescue that person. Also, so many times I've seen a lot of people coming in and expressing to the doctors that I want to do something to myself, but we don't tell it to my family members. So here we are in a confusion that there is a confidentiality, there's a doctor patient confidentiality, there's a confidentiality with your friend, he's your best friend, and you just can't break that thing that I'll go and tell your family. At the same time, every law says that if it is involving the life risk of a person, you should not think about confidentiality. You are free to break that confidentiality if you know that the person might harm himself, might be a risk of harm to self. Then you should and you definitely must involve the family members, the senior authorities, and tell them this should not be taken lightly, because it has been said that it has been studied in studies that has been proven that a person who has once conveyed of ending the life definitely goes in for an attempt, at least even if not a completed suicide, they go for attempted suicide, which can be lethal at times.
So, I think this was a very important point for a lot of us because we do encounter these circumstances. As you have rightly said, 1 out of 3 students are going to suffer. So, the rest too can be alert about reporting this third one. And that might help us save lives and also bring down the suicide rates. And maybe even having support systems and other things in place could help these kids and students. Now, one question: as a psychiatrist, when a patient comes to you, what are the therapies that are offered? And as a non-psychiatrist, our overall training in psychiatry, to be very honest, isn't really great. We have some idea about it, but not really great ideas about it. So there is always this fear that if I'm starting on antidepressants or medicines from a psychiatrist, are these going to be like lifelong medicines I have to take? And also, what about side effects? Am I really going to get addicted to them, or is there some other kind of adverse effect? Is it going to slow me down? What is really going to happen? So I think there's a lot of confusion here. Could you share some information, or how do you approach a patient, and what should we think of?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good thing that you also brought up, and which is true, is that the psychiatric training, I think entire MBBS course is a 2 weeks training which is given in psychiatry, which I think has recently been increased to 1 month. Not many students are, acknowledged to what psychiatric help is. So definitely depression is one of the things which we can treat, and the best part, it is 100% treatable. So 75 to 95% patients start responding to depression within 2 weeks to 3 weeks of starting the treatment. The treatment broadly can be divided into two groups. One is a pharmacological management, as we know the drug, and the other is a non-pharmacological medication, a non-pharmacological management. So coming on the pharmacological management, which is the forte of the doctors and the psychiatrists, we have a range of antidepressants which are available. And yes, any patient who comes to me, first thing they question is what side effects am I going to get with it? The first thing I tell them, it is better than you going into depression and committing suicide. So definitely the side effect profile of every drug is there, but it is not that severe as people think. A few medications are there which are side effect of sleep, but we give it to those people where we know there is insomnia as a major symptom. They're not sleeping. So we give it to them. Nowadays, a lot of new medications which have come into market are weight friendly. So you don't even get a weight gain thing, which is also major concern, especially to females, because females are more prone to depression, ideally. And the other side effects could be mild sexual side effects, but they can also be taken care of after weaning the medication. And a lot of people come with this thing that once we start, it's going to be lifetime. No, definitely not. The medications for depression, as per the guidelines, as per my experience of the last 7 to 8, 9 years, whatever I have is, we start the patient, we give the medications for a minimum of 6 months, and after 6 months, if it's a first episode of depression, we start tapering off the medication, and within a period of maximum 10 to 12 months, they are off medications. If it's the first episode of depression. But if the depression is persistent, the doctor may decide to continue it maybe for a period of a year or two, depending upon the symptoms. But definitely it's not lifelong. And if you go to a doctor, the doctor will ensure you are not on medications which are addiction causing. A lot of people also come to me saying, "Arey, isse to addiction ho jayega." So being doctors, being medicals, you know that there are groups of medications. You have studied in pharmacology. There's something called benzodiazepines, which are dependence causing drugs, and we agree to it, they are used. They're used maybe initially when we want to tide off the depression and anxiety together, but then eventually we taper them and we stop them over a period of 3 to 4 weeks. Post that, we continue the patients on SSRIs or tricyclic agents, which do not have long-term effects and which do not lead to any major issues. Whereas if you think of this that way, that if you're not taking medications, you are harming yourself more. You might end up committing a suicide, or you might end up losing your friend committing a suicide if he's not on medications. So we should not be scared of medications. Medications are for a finite period of time, they are not infinite, and they're something which are going to help you out. The second thing which I was talking about is non-pharmacological management, which is called psychotherapy, which is done by counselors or psychologists. So psychotherapy basically revolves around the thought process. So ideally, we say that whatever we act or whatever our behavior is related to our thought process. And whatever we think is somehow related to my beliefs, which I have inculcated in myself from the childhood, from the day I was born. So basically, what psychotherapists do is they resort to mainly two types of therapies, which is called cognitive behavior therapy and REBT, which is rational emotive behavior therapy. Wherein after a few sessions, they try that a person tries to find out from where is the thought originating. So first from the behavior, they go to the thought. From the thought, they go to the belief. So then they made the patient analyze whether the belief is rational or irrational. And most of the times, almost always, all the thoughts and the beliefs which are related to depression are irrational. So then they work on it from there. So basically, you handle the belief so that the thought process changes, and once the thought process changes, the behavior or the action will change. So that is how the therapy works. Therapy is a long process. Therapy doesn't end in 4 5 days. It takes almost a month. Month is still less, maybe 6 to 8 months to act. Therapy is suitable for patients who are just entering into the phase of depression, who feel that my sadness is now increasing. I should go. Maybe my coping skills are failing right now. I'm not able to cope up with the things as the way I was coping up earlier. So therapy helps those kind of people. And even in severe depression, when a patient is severely depressed, if we are starting him on medication, after maybe a month of medication, when we know the person is cognitively that active, he's got back his thought process, now he can work on himself and work in therapy. then we advise therapy to the patient so that eventually when we are weaning off the medications, maybe 6 to 8 months later, they are able to deal with it by themselves because stressors don't end. Ending of your MBBS course or your PG course doesn't mean that you're not going to have depression ever in your life. You will have these phases wherein the stresses will come. So you should know how to deal with it by yourself. You should know how to analyze your thoughts, analyze your beliefs, and work on it. So that is the non-pharmacological part, which is really helpful nowadays. The number of patients have gone up to the counselors, but definitely if the depression is severe enough, they should go and consult a psychiatrist and don't be scared of medication.
Right. So one question again, maybe an extension of this. So if I ask you roughly, how many patients do you think do well with the non-pharmacologic therapy alone? And vis-a-vis, the second question is once you have treated the first episode and you have stopped the therapy, what percentage roughly would you say would have the second episode and again require a longer term therapy?
So, Sushant, a lot of patients, as I said, it's not what percent of patients who do well on therapy. It's basically depending upon the severity of the depression. So, the intensity of the symptoms and the severity of the symptoms is very high. If a person comes to me saying that, no, I want to end my life, I don't feel like living, I don't feel there is anything in life, that point of time, I cannot send the patient to a therapist because therapy takes time. And that even if he goes straight to the therapist, we get a call from the therapist saying that I feel the person needs drug intervention at this point in time. And if the patient is better, we refer them back to the therapist for the counseling. So counseling and drugs go together in some patients. Therapy response is wonderful, especially in the group of patients who are cognitively much more better. So, for example, if I see a patient who's maybe a rickshaw driver or maybe a person who's not well educated, will not be able to respond to therapy in a better way because for them, analyzing the thoughts and analyzing the beliefs is slightly difficult. So, for these kind of patients, we definitely resort to drugs first and then we go to therapy if possible in their own language. But for a educated sector of people, therapy works beautifully well. I mean, being a psychiatrist, a lot of psychiatrists don't support this, but I know that practically what I have seen in my experiences, it works really well. About the relapse rate in the patients who had first episode of depression, a lot of people, feel better after 2 weeks to 3 weeks. And truly speaking, most of them start saying after 2 months, मुझे जरूरत क्या है दवाई की, I will quit. It is true for the doctors, it is true for the non-doctors. A lot of people stop having medications in between. There is a reason for giving the medications for a longer period of time because it is related to the neurochemicals in the brain, what we call the neurotransmitters. That is why the minimum 6 months duration has been stated. So if you take medications for 6 to 8 months, taper them off properly, you go for therapy properly, the chances of relapsing back reduce to as low as 10 to 15%, which is significantly low. But I've seen people saying in month I'm fine, not going for therapy, I'll be able to handle it now, I'm okay, back to normal, going with friends. They definitely come up with the second episode. And trust me, it's difficult to handle the second episode because the duration of medication increases, the duration of therapy increases, because we all follow certain guidelines. And the guideline says if a person is having the second episode, the duration will increase. So it's best if we diagnose at the first time, we treat it there and then, and we stop it. The chances of relapses will go significantly low.
Right. So it does make sense if any one of you listening to this episode are suffering from depression, have been on medicines, please do not discontinue them without the advice of your doctors. And if you have by chance discontinued, I think it's a good time that you consider meeting your psychiatrist again. And I'm sure they would be able to guide you further. So, Dr. Priyanka, one last question, but an important one. We have understood that 1 out of 3 doctors or medical students are at risk of depression. Is there something we can do to prevent or at least bring down this risk? We are going to have a stressful lifestyle, and that's kind of a given with the profession that we have chosen for ourselves. But are there things that you can suggest which might help us to reduce the risk, or is it just not possible?
I think prevention is better than cure. It's always said, which is true. We can't stop what is coming in, but we can prevent it or we can delay it. Or we can kind of avoid it for the time being by doing certain preventive measures. We all know that the depression is mainly genetic and plus the stress which is mounting to an extremes of levels nowadays in our lives. Genetics we can't do anything about because that's what we are born with. But the thing which we can deal with is the stress. So to prevent the depression, I would say the best thing is have a lifestyle. Everyone in the world at this point of time is focusing on lifestyle modification. Yes, the same applies for depression also. Lifestyle plays an important role. As I said, sleep is very, very important for depression. And even for mental health, it is very, very important. So to be mentally healthy, you should have a proper sleeping time. Partying is fine, but you should make sure that you're sleeping 6 to 8 hours a day. Exercise is one of the most important things that every doctor, including a psychiatrist, will tell you to do. Why exercise? I'd like to elaborate on that. We all have neurotransmitters in our brain, and there's something called as endorphin, which is the stress buster of a human being, which has been developed by God, which is a replacement of our SSRIs or antidepressants, which we give the patient. And that endorphins are released only after workout. So there are studies which have proved that if you have a strong family history of depression or strong family history of any psychiatric illness, and you are working out 45 minutes a day for 3 days a week, your chances of getting mental illness or psychiatric illness or depression goes down significantly low. So regular exercise, regular sleep, a good food. Maybe you should cut down the sugars because a lot of people have these beliefs. You have chocolates, you feel less depressed. Agreed, but you should be away from sugar foods because they harm you in long term. So they lead to all the other side effects, the weight gain, again, low self-esteem. We have seen it fairly commonly that the people who have low self-esteem, body weight issues, have low self-esteem, and those are the people who are prone to get depressed. So, I would suggest to have a healthy lifestyle, proper regular eating, regular sleep, and regular exercise are the three preventive measures which are going to prevent you from depression. And last but not the least is, if you still feel you are on the verge of getting there where you need help, before you go into severe depression, just go out and talk to people around you, talk to a mental health professional who can help you come out of it in a better way so that you lead a much healthier and stress free life, and you give that thing to your patients as well.
That's really interesting. What we would usually advise patients with cardiovascular morbidities or overall lifestyle modifications in medicine is it's very interesting to know that the same things would very often work hand in hand for mental health as well. So I guess it's time that we doctors and medical students we take the same pill that we are advising the world about lifestyle modifications. It was wonderful talking to you, Dr. Priyanka, and I am sure that a lot of our students are going to benefit out of your interview. There are going to be students who would want to reach out to you, and I hope that you will be available for answering their questions as well.
Yes, I'm available. You all can see on the screen my number, my email address. So please take help of the available sources around you. If not me, someone you trust who's your psychiatrist around you. Please go and ask for help, talk it out. Do not take it to yourself. And I'm glad that you have had this session. We had the chance to enlighten the students that they themselves, their friends, and their family members can benefit from it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Priyanka. It was wonderful talking to you. Take care.
Thank you, Susan.